This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. And today I want to talk about streaks and really what it has to do with is psychology. When I first started in the business, I quickly identified Van Tharp as being a resource that I thought could be very helpful. And he had a number of courses, and one of the courses came with a one-on-one consult with him. And so I did that. And again, this was probably back in the 90s, mid to late 90s. And so what's interesting is in the process of going through that, I got a lot of confirmation in what I was trying to do, which is not necessarily be overly consumed with the top-down thesis of the market, but more of a bottom-up approach where I'm looking at individual patterns. And if a stock meets all my criteria, then I know I'm on the right track. And so based on the feedback I got from the Van Tharp group, I definitely got the impression that you can do a bottom-up approach that way, and they call it a self-regulating approach, meaning that if a market is good, you'll have a lot of ideas that meet your criteria, and if a market is bad, you'll have very few. And that's definitely the way it works for me, and I've gotten some feedback on the size of my lists recently that I send out on Wednesday, which is basically going through all the stocks and identifying which stocks have really attractive characteristics. That's for my monthly research. And so that weekly report gives a lot of weekly patterns that guys then they can use for trading ideas. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to understand something, and I'm going to get into this right now. So let's just get into this. So here's an example of a stock that I've highlighted recently, and it's got all the characteristics that I like. So on a monthly chart, it's not really ready because the 18-month is just starting to flatten out. But you notice the big green bar and the fact that we are above the 18-month line. Okay, so it's not hurting us. The monthly isn't telling us not to do it. It's just not a signal. Okay. Now, if I go to the weekly chart, this is really the time frame that I want to trade. I've got a really great looking pattern that has based, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see new momentum come up based on the buyers. After we saw a lot of momentum to the downside, it kind of died out, and now we've got new strength based on the green DI. And then we have this duckbill looking pinch play. You see how it looks like a duckbill setting up on this weekly chart. And then if we go to the daily chart, we had a move to the downside. We get our counter trend pattern where the 18 crosses down below the 40 and price is below both. MACD overruns the zero line a little bit, but then has come up now and formed a pinch play, and we have a low ADX condition. Sellers never took control. So this is a really attractive pattern. You could have either done on a higher pivot low on the weekly, or you could be taking it here as it's making a higher pivot low, or on the pinch play on the daily chart. So obviously, as I state at the beginning, these aren't recommendations. This is for education, but I want to point something out. So this has pretty much all the criteria. Now, the biggest negative with this is they have earnings in 9 days. So if I see something that's T minus 10 with earnings, then I tend to shy away. I just don't like doing it close enough to earnings where there's just people have no idea of what's going to come out. It could come out really good and it can come out really poorly. Stock could gap up, could gap down. But we know that there's probably going to be some movement, some volatility around that earnings. So I'm mainly bringing this up because this meets all the criteria that I would look for. All the way down to the hourly chart, look at this little crossover signal where green held above here, so you could even be buying this breakout on the hourly pattern, low ADX, and we get green to hold. So yeah, really kind of interesting when you look at it across the board. Now, what I want to point out here is that you could do 200 of these. 200 charts over the course of the next year, 2 years, that have all these criteria together. Now, this is a weekly, daily pattern that's how I would define it for my subscribers and say, we have the weekly trend, we're trading it off the daily. So we're going to use daily risk. We're going to manage it off the daily and see how far it wants to go. Now, the point I want to make here is that this kind of meets everything that I look for, but I have to accept that based on the way that I do things, that it's probably gonna, the potential for doing this pattern and having 4 in a row wrong, 4 in a row that are losers, is very high over the next 200 trades. Okay, let me just give you an example here. I've got this streak calculator that's on betworthy.com, so you can find it and you can do a couple tests on this. So I'm using 200 trades, series length, right? I'm using 4 for the streak length, meaning how many times in a row can I lose? Okay, that's 4. And then the loss probability, I put at 40%, which means 60% of the time are winners, 40% are losers. How often am I going to get 4 in a row that are a loser? And if I calculate that out, it comes out to 96% of the time. So out of the 200 trades, there's a 96% chance I'm going to have 4 trades in a row that are losers. Okay? So if that's the case, I have to accept that that 4 in a row is a lot. Okay, if you're going to go through 4 in a row losers, most of the people that I know do 2 or 3 losses in a row and then they totally throw the system away. They'll just give up on it. They'll just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore, or they have to go find something else to add into the equation. Now, we're talking about an approach that has a 60% win rate and a 40% loss rate. Okay, so it's not like we're talking about something that has a 40% win rate. And in those cases, I can kind of see how you could get, a little disgusted if you're feeling like you're just not making any money and you can't, make any progress. But in this case, we're talking about a 60% win, 40% loss, and you're still going to have 4 losses in a row. And so if you accept that, I think it helps with your mentality in trading, because the hardest part is when you put on a series of these trades and you have a couple losses in a row, even 2 or 3, and you hesitate on that next trade. On the 4th trade, you hesitate. If you lose 4 times in a row, most people just scrap it or stop trading. That's what I've noticed. And they basically want to start over, add another indicator, whatever the approach they're using, they just scrap it and they start from scratch. And the reality is you probably might need to tweak it potentially, but not because of 3 to 4 losses in a row. Okay, this is something, this is right out of my book, and I want to make sure I cover this because I've never really done a video on this. I think, especially when you're in a bear market, and you're using that self-regulating idea approach, you're still going to you could have periods where you actually have more than 4 in a row. You could have 6 or 7 losses in a row. It doesn't mean the system doesn't work, all right? In a bull market, you might only have 1 or 2, 3 in a row, right? I mean, just because the conditions are better. Overall, on average, over the course of 200 trades, yeah, you're going to have a 95, 96% chance of having 4 losses in a row. So if you can accept that, I think it's going to help you much better in handling it from a mental standpoint. I mean, in other words, you have to be able to take losses and continue trading and using your approach. This goes for anybody. And the pros have accepted this. That's why they look at things in a 20 to 25 trade segment rather than looking at every single trade as being that important. So I wanted to make sure I got this across. And no, don't feel like if you can't, that if you do a trade like this and it's supposed to be perfect, everything looks good and it's a loser, it doesn't mean the system doesn't work. I mean, that's the main point I wanted to get across here. So anyway, go ahead and let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks.